without further ado, yeah, further ado, I'll let you go first with the first pick for the Cleveland Browns, pick number 54 in the second round.
So this English is difficult tonight, Derek, isn't it?
Listen, don't
Uh,
whatever.
this is a guy that we did have mocked to us, I believe, last week, and we picked up Michael Hall from Ohio State, and I love the pick. It's a great pickup for the Browns. Like I said last week, if he could drop 30, 40 pounds, we can maybe use him as some type of edge, hybrid, linebacker type spot if injuries pile up again or if we want to throw some wrinkles at teams. Uh, Loaded D tackle room, so I really do think he's a guy that's going to have to find a spot elsewhere and probably put some muscle on and turn some of that fat into muscle to be more productive his rookie season. Otherwise, he may not see much action this year and might just be able to develop behind guys like Shelby Harris and our other defensive tackles. And I mean, I don't hate it either way. If we could get him on the field, I think he'd be an X factor for the defense when he's called upon. But I love the pick. Honestly, it's the right pick for who was left at the time. I have zero complaints. I think it's a great pickup. Honestly, I think Andrew Berry killed the first two picks of this draft. We'll get into the more of the later picks later on, but Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll kind of talk about who was there later that kind of surprised me and what I would have done. But yeah, the Browns went with defensive tackle Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State. Just for context, he's 6'2", 280 pounds. He weighed in around 300 at his pro day, so that was a big thing. Kid from Streetsboro High School, so a Cleveland area kid. Shout out to Wesley. Um, you know, Mike Hall Jr. is 20 years old. I'm 21, right? And I've been watching Mike Hall Jr. dominate at Ohio State for like the past 2-3 years. So if you look at it from that standpoint, this is a guy who is like 18 years old bullying grown men, right? At a big school at Ohio State. And listen, he had a great Senior Bowl, right? Put on a show. And historically, if you have a pretty good Senior Bowl, it translates well to the NFL. I'm not saying the Senior Bowl is everything, but most recently, a guy like Tank Dell, who there was a lot of question marks about him. People didn't really know what he was going to be. He had a really good Senior Bowl. And it goes for every position. Quarterback, Dak Prescott was a Senior Bowl quarterback and had a good performance, ends up going to the Cowboys, and the rest is history. But back to Mike Hall, he's been great. And what is best about him is he's a pass rusher. He's a 3-tech impact pass rusher. That is what he does. Now, Jim Schwartz, this is clearly a Jim Schwartz pick. If you look at his career, he has always had that one guy who is an instant impact interior pass rusher. You can think of a guy like Ndamukong Suh in Jim Schwartz past, and there's many more. But he fits all the criteria of kind of what we're looking for. We don't really have a young guy who can pass rush from the inside. And again, at 20 years old, he's only going to get better. And he's got great hand technique. He's violent, but he's also slippery. Like, he's not just going to beat you one way. And I think watching him over these last couple years here in Columbus, Tony, the one thing that blows me away is even though people say he's not bigger and he's not like this big physical threat as a defensive tackle, I have seen him, and again, offensive line, defensive line, it's all about leverage. It's all about technique. It's all about leverage. And the way that he kind of plants his foot in the ground, anchors, and just shoves the man in front of him around is insane. It is absolutely insane. But like I mentioned, he can also beat you with his speed. He can beat you with quickness. He can beat you with power. So what's the negative? He's been knocked over the course of his career so far for being a little bit inconsistent, which again, as young as he is,
he's young, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a very young player.
You're going to have that. So all in all, I think this is an outstanding pick. I think that he's going to be a significant starter for the Browns. I think he's going to be really good. Now, Tony, you mentioned it, and maybe we should talk about this a little bit. The defensive tackle depth now. You have Mo Hurst, who you brought back, Shelby Harris, who you brought back. You signed Quentin Jefferson. You, of course, had Dalvin Tomlinson, who's the head up of that group, and then Siaki Ika sitting there. And we'll talk about another defensive tackle who we drafted late. Um, I guess, how do you see that room shaking out? Do you think Ika has some fire under him?
I think it all just comes down to it's going to be a camp competition, and I think whoever performs. Obviously, I don't see Michael Hall getting cut. If anything, maybe a short stint on the practice squad. My only worry is someone would probably pick him up if that were to be the case.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
We'll see what happens in camp. I mean, if Siaki Ika has a fire under his belly and performs well and finds a way to stay on this team, I could see maybe him getting shipped out, or I could see maybe Mo Hurst getting shipped out for a draft pick or somewhere along those lines. Obviously, Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, guys that are probably not going to go anywhere this year, barring injury, barring some kind of off the field situation. It's a great pick for the future. I don't look for him to start right away. Obviously, nobody should expect him to start right away. He's currently listed as a number 2, I believe, on our depth chart. And, I mean, he'll definitely get some rotational minutes, but definitely a good future pick. I love it. Anything else you want to add on Michael Hall, or do you want to move on to the next pick?
Last thing I'll say, as far as what you just mentioned about getting in rotation, I do think he will see the field, right? Jordan Elliott was on the field and he played well this past year. And you got to think he's gone. The Browns signed Quentin Jefferson. How much of that balance is going to be there? I think they're going to take their time and develop him, but especially middle to back half of the season, I think you're going to see him getting involved
I agree.
somehow.
I agree completely. So we'll move on to our round 3 pick here. And this is a pick, I'll just straight up say before I go, I'll let Derek go first on this one, but I loved it. Zach Zinter out of Michigan. He played guard, he played center at Michigan. Derek, what are your thoughts on this pickup?
Yeah, I think this has the potential to be one of the biggest steals of the draft. Zach Zinter, 6'6", 309 pounds. He played right guard at Michigan for the most part. Like you mentioned, he played center as well, so he does have some versatility if need be. 23 years old. And listen, this dude, the story with him is kind of simple, right? He was the best offensive lineman on Michigan teams that were dominant up front. And he is one of these guys, 0 sacks allowed on 287 pass blocking attempts. So that should tell you all you need to know. I want to say he only gave up 4 sacks his entire college career. The dude got hurt, broken tibia, and I can't pronounce whatever.
Fibia.
Yeah,
Fibia.
yeah, he broke
Fibula.
that. Yeah, fibula. In November, ironically against Ohio State, and just so happens that fate comes down to the fact that one Mike Hall Jr. was the one who got shoved into him, and ultimately ended up ending his season at Michigan. So it's funny how those two kind of end up on the same team. And it's kind of funny how the Browns go Buckeye, Wolverine, top 2 picks. But kind of wrapping up here, at least on my side of things, like, listen, he's legit. He's legit. And he was a captain for that team. They rallied behind him. He's got all the size, all the strength. He's a bully. He's physical. He'll get to the next level and throw you on the ground. Tony, at least in my eyes, obviously he's not starting this season,
No,
but
there's no way.
I think this is our long-term right guard. I think the Browns
Absolutely.
trade Wyatt Teller probably after next season, and I think Zinter takes over. And honestly, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think when it comes time for Batonio to leave, kind of that veteran leadership and also a great player, I think Zinter could be that for the Browns. I think he could be that good. But all in all, great value. But what did you when the pick was announced, what what was your reaction?
I loved it. I mean, this is a guy that was, again, we mocked him, I believe, in our draft. I love the pick. This is a guy that was the heart and soul of these Michigan teams. And his injury, as you can see, that whole team rallied around him. And maybe a little bit of a hot take here. What do you think about the potential of Zinter playing this year, but not at guard? What if they're just like, hey, you want to place in the center? Could you imagine Teller, Zinter, and Batonio as our middle three with Wills and DeJuan Jones on the tackles?
So personally, I don't think that happens unless
No,
there's
we're
mass.
talking. Yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
injury hypothetical right now. I
I,
wouldn't hate it if it had to happen. I wouldn't hate it. That's all I'm just.
if they needed to, yeah, I could see it. But I want to ask you this because Tony, I kind of feel like the center to right tackle position is set for the next 3-4 years. You have Luke Whippler, Zach Zinter, and DeJuan Jones now.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of set. So
Unless we ship off Jed Wills and move DeJuan Jones to left tackle.
yeah,
But
I mean, could happen, but dude, he's a leader.
no, for anyone that doesn't watch much college football, I'll just give you an example. Michael Cozy loved this pick. And if you know Michael Cozy, the fact that Zinter went to Michigan and he was openly excited on Twitter. That tells me all I need to know. Even if I didn't watch any tape on the kid, if I didn't watch him play football every week, that tells me all I need to know right there. Like, I'm sold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy about it. I'm thrilled about the pick. I love it. This is kind of where, after our first two picks, Andrew Berry kind of turned the stove down to simmer instead of cook. But all in all, I can't complain. I mean, fuck, no first round pick,
Mm-hmm.
no fourth round pick, late third round pick. I mean, you work with what you got. We didn't make no trades. Moving on, Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, wide receiver. We did address the wide receiver position, but a lot of people were upset by this selection. And I mean, I don't hate it, but it tells me that Cedric Tillman may have a little bit bigger of a future on this team than we think still. Tillman may not be in danger of being shipped off or cut or, this is like a hit or miss hit or hit or miss pick. There we go. English difficult.
We're
10 o'clock.
struggling tonight.
It's 10 o'clock. It's late. We're old. I've seen people comparing Jamari Thrash to Anthony Schwartz. That's what I want to know. How do you feel about that?
No. Listen, I think you're kind of spot on. I think this is a hit or miss type of pick, right? I did a lot of work on receiver, and we'll kind of get to that later as far as who was there for the Browns to grab at
Yeah.
receiver.
I will say that there was other options that I would have rather went with, but I'm not going to complain about a fifth round pick.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, it's a fifth round pick. But just as far as Jamari Thrash as a player, so he's 6 foot, 188 pounds. Ran a 4.46 40. He's a very fascinating player. He is one of these guys you can't really, like, I don't know. I wish I could sit here and say, nope, he's going to be great. But I also can't sit here and say, no, he's going to suck. Like, he has a lot of talent. He has really good speed. It's more so of a quickness than speed. But he's really good kind of stopping on a dime as far as in and out of his routes. And it's the tale of two stories with Jamari Thrash. At Louisville, he was a deep vertical threat, a lot of hitch routes, those sorts of things. And just real quick, as far as a comparison, I kind of see him maybe being like a Will Fuller type for the Browns. But that's Louisville. You go back to Georgia State, where he was at before he had transferred, they were using him all over the field. He ran every route on the route tree. He was consistent, and that's the number one thing. He's a very smart player. Like, Jamari Thrash is a very high football IQ player. He consistently in college got first downs. He was a chain mover.
Yeah, definitely a lot of first downs out of Thrash. A guy that is going to get you a pretty good, you know, yards per catch average, move the chains for you. And like you said, hit or miss. Like I said, hit or miss. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, okay, fifth round pick, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have
He,
no complaints.
so here's kind of the question mark with him though. He's very thin. He's
Yeah.
very thin. And he kind of struggles with contact. He struggles with press. So, if you use him in certain ways, he can be really good. Like, I would not be surprised if Jamari Thrash is a deep threat guy, kind of a speed guy that we bring in, just to use as somebody who can take the top off the defense. And I know, Elijah Moore, sorry. Who is Anthony Schwartz? You mentioned
Schwartz,
it.
yeah.
You know what the difference between Jamari Thrash and Anthony Schwartz is?
Jamari Thrash can catch the football.
He can catch the football and he knows how to run routes.
Yeah.
He can run routes. So, I I like him. I do. But it's what you mentioned. He's a 5th round pick. So we're not tied to him. But also, you got to factor in this too. You're going to find out how good this receiver class was. This class is deep.
Deep.
Very deep. So just because he's a 5th round pick, I wouldn't write him off, but at the same time, I wouldn't get your hopes up. He certainly has a role on this team for sure, because he brings that speed element, that quickness element, that we don't have a whole lot of. So I think he does have a role. But if it works, awesome. But if it doesn't, you're not tied to him.
Yeah, you're not mad about it.
Yeah.
I think, we got to learn how to beat the press for him, beat him. He doesn't like contact, skinny guy. A lot of motion. If we're going to put him on the field, I'd like to see a lot of motion out of him, get him a running start, get him in space. But moving on to, and I love this guy's name, our 6th round pick, Nathaniel Watson.
I wonder if he lives in a trailer.
I don't know.
Probably not. Yeah, not anymore.
Linebacker out of Mississippi State. So, again, another late round pick that it's kind of like, all right, doesn't work out, so be it. But it does work out. AB looks like a genius. Derek, what are your thoughts on Watson? Another Watson on the roster.
Yeah, we now have 2 Watsons on the roster. I don't know if that's a good thing.
Three, right? The tight end is like we have a Watson as a tight end, don't we?
No.
We're not. Am I tripping?
Yeah, because we have Njoku, Aikens, and then the dude we signed out of Carolina, Ricci or whatever. He's like a fullback.
Who am I thinking of? Who am I thinking of? We used to have a Watson.
Leroy Watson was the tackle. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yep.
Yeah. Oops.
Oh well.
Late. It's late.
Nevertheless, another Watson on the team. I think at this point, I would be surprised if any of these bottom 3 guys make the roster. I think Watson has the best chance. He's 6'2", 245. He's kind of an old school style of linebacker. He's a box, run defend type of linebacker. That's what you're going to use him as. He had 31 tackles for loss, 21 sacks since 2021. He's interesting. I think he does have a skill set, but the problem is Buddy's been in college forever.
Long time. Yeah.
He was in college for a long, long time. And another major red flag, at least for me, doesn't really have the solo tackles, which is concerning. So,
I mean, like you said, it's a fringe guy that likely won't make the roster. It's linebacker depth, which is something we need. That might be what saves his ass, is the fact that there's just barely anybody left in that linebacker room. But he definitely has to get better at getting penetration on his own, wrapping up, getting some solo tackles. I mean, the guy's basically a senior citizen instead of a super senior at this point, so he should definitely be developed enough. But there's not much really to say about the last 2 draft picks.
Special teams.
Yeah,
He
special
has to
teams
make an
guys.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Miles Harden, cornerback out of South Dakota, another body in the defensive backfield. Again, another fringe guy. I cannot talk tonight. Another fringe guy that'll probably be a special teams contributor if he makes the roster. And I'm not mad about that. I mean, I'll take all the bodies we can get, especially after last year and all the injuries we dealt with. Decent cornerback, but again, probably a guy that's going to make more of an impact on special teams for the Browns and his NFL future. There,
Yeah, if he makes the team, which I think he would be lucky to make the team, I just kind of, I think our cornerback room is set. So I
stacked.
view
Yeah.
him. He's probably a practice squad guy. He's not terrible. 5'11", 195 pounds. Really good tackler, zone corner. He's physical. Struggles with press, or I'm sorry, yeah, struggles with press. Also has dealt with some injuries. You don't want him, as far as him being a cornerback, you don't want him playing outside. Like, he is a nickel corner at best. He does not have long arms, which is,
No,
it's, as a corner, that's a red flag, especially at the NFL
for
level.
sure.
So I don't think he makes the roster, but if he does, it's a special teams guy for sure.
It'd be nice if we could get a guy like a Matthew Slater, who's a cornerback and just develops into a really goated special teams player for his entire career,
Yeah.
but very unlikely. So our last pick, and potentially a guy that could have a lot of impact because of certain bodies in the D tackle room, Jawan Briggs out of Cincinnati. Maybe another guy that could, kind of put Siaki Ika on notice there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder. I wish we could have a direct phone to Andrew Barry, and the first thing I would ask him with this is like, did you actually know anything about him, or did you just need to make a pick and this is who you picked? Because Juwan Briggs, 6'1", 313. There's not a lot of good, really. Um, he's solid in run D, and he was a team captain. That's kind of the only good things I can say about him. He wasn't good in pass defense. And as far as what you mentioned, yeah, maybe his run defensive ability is kind of a fire on Siaki Ika for sure. I could see that, but the problem is he's a seventh round pick, man. Like, I'd be surprised if he even makes the practice squad.
Yeah.
I just don't. I really do. I wonder if this was just Andrew Barrett was trying to trade the pick and nobody wanted to do it, and he was like, "Ah, screw it, take him." I guess like that.
Yeah, pretty much.